The pen felt heavier than it should have. My hand trembled as I signed the last page, the ink bleeding into paper that sealed the end of everything I thought was permanent. Across the table, she sat straight, unbothered. The same woman I once believed I'd grow old with. The same woman I'd sacrificed nights, years, and pieces of myself for. She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She smiled. Not a smile of relief. Not even a polite curve of lips to mask discomfort. No, hers was sharp, deliberate. Mocking. A victory grin carved into her face like she'd won some long, cruel game. The lawyer cleared his throat, slid the documents into a folder, muttered something about best wishes. But his voice drowned under the thunder in my head. Her smile wasn't a relief. It was a triumph. And that's when I knew, I couldn't let her win. We met in college, back when the world felt wide open and every dream seemed reachable if we held onto each other tightly enough. She had this way of walking into a room that made everything else blur into the background. I was just another face in a crowded lecture hall, but when she laughed at one of my clumsy jokes after class, I felt like I'd been chosen. We started with late-night study sessions, sharing energy drinks and whispered secrets while everyone else slept. She'd doodle on the corners of my notes, little hearts, crooked smiley faces. I still remember the first time she rested her head on my shoulder, half asleep, and murmured, "Don't move. You're warm." Back then, I promised myself I'd never let her down. And I didn't. When her dream job took her across the city after graduation, I followed, even though it meant shelving my own ambitions. I took whatever work I could find, long hours, grueling shifts. I told myself it was temporary, that sacrifices now would mean comfort later. She was always so grateful at first, kissing my cheek when I stumbled home exhausted, whispering, "We're building something, baby. Just wait." We had our rituals. Friday nights were sacred, cheap takeout, bad movies, her falling asleep halfway through while I carried her to bed. Sunday mornings, she'd make pancakes and tease me for burning the bacon. And we had dreams, endless ones. A house with a garden. Kids running through the yard. Trips we couldn't yet afford but mapped out anyway, pointing to places on a worn-out globe. It was love in its purest, simplest form. Or at least, that's what I thought. I remember one night, curled up on the couch, she turned to me and asked, "Do you ever think about what we'll be like when we're old?" I laughed. "Yeah. You'll still boss me around, and I'll still pretend to hate it." She smiled and leaned in. "Promise me we'll make it that far." And I did. I promised. Without hesitation. But somewhere along the way, things began to shift. Subtle at first. She started working later. At least, that's what she told me. I'd sit at home, dinner going cold, phone silent. I'd hear her come in hours past midnight, heels clicking across the floor, the scent of perfume lingering long after she'd slipped into the shower. "Rough day?" I'd ask, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Yeah," she'd sigh, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek. "Clients are demanding. You know how it is." And I did know. Or at least I thought I did. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? There were other things too. Nights when she'd sit across from me at the table, phone in hand, smiling at something she wouldn't share. Times when she pulled away from my touch, muttering that she was just tired. I told myself it was stressful. Work pressure. Maybe even just growing pains. Relationships go through phases, right? That's what I clung to, because the alternative was too painful to even imagine. I doubled down on being supportive. I worked extra shifts, brought home flowers for no reason, booked small weekend getaways to remind her, and maybe myself, that we still had magic between us. Sometimes it worked. For a night, she'd curl up against me, whispering, "I don't deserve you." And I'd laugh softly, brushing her hair back. "Don't say that. You're everything to me." I thought love was enough to fix anything. I thought loyalty was a shield that could keep cracks from splitting wide open. But love can blind you. And I was blind. Every excuse, every late night, every unexplained smile at her phone, I swallowed it all, telling myself I trusted her, because that's what love was supposed to be. What I didn't realize then was that trust, in the wrong hands, is a weapon. And she was already sharpening hers behind that smile. The first time I noticed her hiding her phone, I brushed it off. We were sitting on the couch, half watching a show neither of us cared about, when her screen lit up. She grabbed it so fast you'd think it was about to explode. Who was that? I asked, more curious than suspicious. She tilted the phone away from me, thumbs moving quick, then set it face down on the armrest. Work, she said simply, eyes fixed on the TV. Work. That one word became her shield, her excuse for everything. Late nights, missed dinners, unanswered calls, it was always work. And I believed her. I wanted to believe her. But then came the credit card bill. I opened it one morning at the kitchen counter, expecting the usual charges, groceries, gas, utilities. Instead, there were dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, boutique shops I knew she'd never taken me into, hotel transactions that didn't line up with any trip we'd made. When I asked, she laughed it off. Oh, come on. I took clients out. You know my company reimburses. I nodded, pretending to accept it. But deep down, unease curled like smoke in my chest. It wasn't just the phone or the bills. It was her. The way she began to keep a subtle distance when we were alone. How she turned her body away when I reached for her in bed, mumbling that she was tired, rolling onto her side. How her kisses, once full of warmth, had started feeling like obligations. But every time doubt crept in, I silenced it with rationalizations. Maybe she's just stressed. Maybe she's under pressure at work. Maybe I'm overthinking this. And then, just when the tension inside me stretched to breaking, she'd flip the script. Out of nowhere, she'd become affectionate again. One night she came home early with my favorite takeout, a bottle of wine tucked under her arm. She wrapped herself around me before I could even ask what was going on, whispering, "I miss you." I melted. My walls collapsed in an instant. We spent the night laughing, eating greasy noodles straight from the cartons, her head on my shoulder as she murmured, "You're too good to me." And just like that, I was convinced it was all in my head. That maybe the distance I felt wasn't her fault, but mine. Maybe I wasn't doing enough to make her feel loved. That cycle kept me trapped, her coldness carving me open, her sudden tenderness stitching me just enough to keep me bleeding for her again. But unease has a way of resurfacing no matter how deep you bury it. It was a friend who cracked the illusion. We were grabbing drinks one night when he leaned in, his voice low, hesitant. "Hey, don't take this the wrong way, but I thought I saw your wife downtown the other night." She wasn't alone. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. Could have been nothing. Just, she was with some guy. They looked close. I forced a laugh, dismissive, my voice shaking. "Nah, that must have been someone else. She works late downtown all the time." But inside, doubt screamed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark listening to her breathe beside me, wondering if every word she'd ever spoken was a lie. My mind replayed every late night, every hushed phone call, every unexplained charge. And for the first time, instead of convincing myself she was innocent, I started to wonder if she wasn't. The paranoia ate at me. I began to watch her more closely. The way she'd smile at her phone, thumbs tapping quickly, screen tilted away just enough so I couldn't see. The way her voice softened on certain calls when she thought I wasn't listening. And then came the night that tore away the last of my illusions. She'd fallen asleep on the couch, phone slipping from her hand. My heart hammered as I picked it up, torn between the desperate need to know and the fear of what I'd find. The messages were gone. Deleted. Every single thread scrubbed clean. Except one. One slip. A message she must have missed in her rush to erase everything. It read, "Can't wait until he's out of the way." My blood turned to ice. My hands shook as I read it again and again, each word searing itself into my skull. Out of the way. That was me. I stared at her as she slept peacefully on the couch, her lips curved in the faintest smile, as if she knew she'd already won. And in that moment, something inside me broke. The man who believed in love, in loyalty, in sacrifice, he died quietly that night. What remained was something else. Something colder. Something that refused to let her smile be the last word. After that message, "Can't wait until he's out of the way," sleep became impossible. Nights stretched into endless hours of staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every conversation, every excuse, every smile she had given me with new meaning. I couldn't shake the thought, was I living beside a stranger this whole time? I had to know the truth. So I followed her. It was a Thursday. She kissed my cheek that morning, her lips soft, her perfume lingering as she whispered, "Don't wait up. Late meeting tonight." My hands trembled as I watched her walk out the door, pretending like everything was fine. Pretending like she hadn't already written me off. I left work early, parked a few blocks away from her office, and waited. Hours passed. My palms sweated against the steering wheel. Then I saw her, stepping out of the building, laughing in a way I hadn't heard in months. And she wasn't alone. He was tall, dressed sharp, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in the glossy magazines she used to leave lying on our coffee table. She touched his arm as they walked, leaned into him when he whispered something in her ear. My heart didn't just break. It disintegrated. I followed at a distance, each step a hammer blow against my chest. They went to a restaurant, the kind of place she'd always said we couldn't afford. The kind of place our credit card statements had hinted at. I sat in my car outside, staring through the windows, watching her sip wine with that same smile she used to give me. But it wasn't just dinner. It was intimacy. Comfort. The ease of two people who weren't new to each other. The way she rested her hand on his thigh, the way his arm slid around her shoulders. This wasn't recent. This wasn't a mistake. This had been going on for months. Maybe years. I wanted to storm in, flip the table, scream every accusation burning in my throat. But I didn't. I sat there in silence, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white, because deep down I knew, I needed more than anger. I needed the truth. And the truth came, piece by piece, cruel and deliberate. I started digging. Financial records. Emails. I even reached out to people I thought were our friends, only to find cold responses and awkward silences. She had already poisoned the well, whispered her version of the story long before I ever suspected a thing. To them, I was the inattentive husband, the one who drove her away. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became, she wasn't just leaving me. She was erasing me. The divorce wasn't an accident. It was orchestrated. The timing, the paperwork, the way assets were already aligned in her favor before I'd even signed a thing. She had been planning this with precision, dismantling my life piece by piece while smiling at me across the dinner table. One night, I confronted her. I stood in the kitchen, heart pounding, papers trembling in my hands. "How long?" I asked. She didn't even flinch. "How long is it? Don't do that. Don't lie to me anymore." My voice cracked. "How long have you been with him?" Silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. Then she sighed, setting her wine glass down with deliberate calm. "Does it matter?" My chest tightened. "It matters to me." She looked me dead in the eye, cold and unyielding. Years. The word gutted me. Years. All those nights I thought she was working late, all those moments I thought she was mine, she was his. Did you ever love me? My voice was barely a whisper. Her lips curved into that same cruel smile she wore at the divorce signing. I loved what you gave me. The room spun. My hands shook so badly I dropped the papers onto the floor, pages scattering like broken promises. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. That night, I sat alone in the dark, shaking, my chest hollow. The walls of our house closed in on me, every photograph mocking me with memories of a life that never truly belonged to me. Sleep was impossible. When I closed my eyes, I saw her with him, laughing, whispering, sharing the parts of herself she once reserved for me. The grief was endless. Raw. Suffocating. But in that grief, something else stirred. Because while I was drowning, she was thriving. Flaunting her new life, parading him around, flashing that victorious smile like she'd won some grand prize. She believed she had broken me, that I'd fade quietly from her story, leaving her free to rewrite the ending however she pleased. And for a time, she was right. I was broken. But pain has a way of reshaping a man. As I watched her bask in triumph, a seed of something darker began to grow inside me. It wasn't loud, it wasn't impulsive. It was quiet. Cold. Patient. She thought she'd won. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. The grief that took me first was a raw animal thing, a tidal wave that knocked the air from my lungs. But grief doesn't last forever. It recedes. It leaves a shoreline of debris. And what it left inside me was hard and clean, like a shard of glass. I stopped begging. I stopped yelling. I stopped calling her name like it might pull her back through a door she had already closed. Instead, I watched. Watching felt safer than feeling. Feeling had been dangerous, feeling had left me exposed. Watching let me be precise. Watching let me catalog every movement, every habit, every vanity she used as armor. If she wanted a war, I would prepare for one with the patience of a surgeon. First, I learned to look without being seen. I left late, came home early, sat in my car and read in the parking lot until I knew the pattern of her days. I watched the cadence of her phone calls, the places she lingered, the way she smiled at certain names on her screen. I memorized the brands she favored, the salons she trusted, the events she couldn't resist. All of it was gravity for her, what she orbited around, appearances, status, the careful arrangement of a life that looked good in photos. I catalogued her weaknesses like a collector catalogues coins. Greed was at the top. She liked the shine of things. She liked people who could make her life look like a glossy page, the right dress, the right car, the right caption. Reputation came next. She'd staked so much on what others thought of her. And under both of those was vanity, a soft, fragile place that flinched when threatened. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I didn't tell her. There was no need. Revenge never benefits from an audience. It benefits from secrecy. But secrecy needs evidence. My anger wanted theatrics, my mind wanted proof. I gathered what I could without breaking laws or burning bridges that might still be useful. I sorted through the paper trail she left behind, receipts, booking confirmations, small clues in plain sight. I paid close attention to the accounts linked to our shared life, where money moved, who paid what, and how her pattern of spending suddenly diverged. I didn't hack. I didn't break in. I used my head and the world's clumsiness. People leave traces when they don't think anybody is watching. She assumed I was asleep or too distracted to notice. She forgot I used to know her as well as my own fingerprints. At the same time, I started to rebuild myself like a man replacing a broken gear. I took a job that let me be invisible, nights, freelance work, hours that wouldn't make me miss important moments. I learned to be steady, to answer friends' calls without sounding like a man undone. If she had prepared by poisoning our friends against me, I would widen the circle and tell a different kind of story, one of quiet competence, of calm dignity. People believe what is easiest to believe. I would make what I wanted believed, by being unremarkable until the moment it wasn't. There was a practical part to planning, and then there was the moral calculus. I had to ask myself what kind of man I wanted to become. Could I let go of the desire for her to suffer? Could I accept that winning might be hollow? Each night, the shard in my chest reminded me, she smiled like a victor at the signing. That smile lived on in me as an ember. I fanned it. I promised myself only one thing: whatever I planned had to be deserved and definitive, not a petty collapse into the kind of cruelty that would make me look like the monster she suggested I was. Then luck, or perhaps simple human error, handed me a doorway. He had a wife. It started as a rumor I overheard in a cafe. A woman across the room was speaking on the phone in sharp, clipped sentences. Her voice drifted over a few lines. She mentioned a name. The name matched the last name of the man I had watched with her. I didn't move. I drank my coffee until it went cold. Then I followed the sound of the thread and found the woman on social media, a smiling profile, wedding photos, the usual curated delights. Her bio didn't mention betrayal. Life is tidy like that online. Something in me knew to reach out. I messaged her with the barest honesty I could manage. I didn't claim to be a hero. I didn't promise justice. I wrote a simple sentence: I think my wife is involved with your husband. I have proof. If you want to know, meet me in person. No drama. No public spectacle unless you want it. There are risks in galvanizing a stranger. But betrayal begets an odd solidarity. Grief and humiliation have a way of uniting people who otherwise would never speak. She agreed to meet, in a public place, daytime, safe. She looked at me the way someone looks at a mirror that shows something they had suspected but never wanted to see. Her name was Elise. She had the steady, exhausted face of someone who had been asking herself for months if the troubleshooting in her marriage would ever stop. When I showed her the photos I had, nothing explicit, just enough to stitch the circumstantial truth into a rope, she didn't shout. She didn't scream. Her hands trembled the way mine had when I read that message on the couch. And then, with an efficiency that surprised me, she asked practical questions. Has he paid for anything recently? Does he have other accounts? Who else knows? What do you want to do? We began to exchange information in the way people patch together a plan to climb out of a pit. Elise had access to certain documents, to bank statements in her name, to family contacts that I couldn't reach. Her knowledge filled gaps in my portrait of their arrangement. In return, I gave her the timeline I had compiled, the dates, the receipts, the small humiliations that proved this was not a one-off mistake. She brought an unexpected edge, the capacity for procedural thinking born of someone who had spent nights making lists to keep a household upright. We didn't have illusions about being noble. We had wounds and a mutual appetite for accountability. Our alliance was not romantic, it was strategic, brittle, and effective. The more we pooled, the more she confirmed what my gut had feared: they had not only been intimate, they had been planning. Contracts were shifted. Small property moves had happened quietly. Friends I'd once trusted now used the word irreconcilable in the same sentence as me, but against me. She had cultivated pity and used it like a cloak. She'd whispered narratives about my supposed negligence. It made sense, cruel as it was: paint the husband as the problem, and the community will pick a side without asking for evidence. Armed with alliances and fragments of proof, I refined my approach. I would not rush. I would apply pressure in places she could not easily fix. Her reputation was a tapestry: if you pull one thread in the right direction, the pattern starts to unravel. Financial embarrassment would worry her, certainly. Publicly visible social slips would gnaw at her vanity. But you can't sustain revenge on theatricality alone. It needed to be surgical. There were setbacks that nearly undid me. Once, I left an envelope full of documents at her old workplace as a package to be filed, the kind of amateur trick that movies glorify. I know how stupid that sounds now. An HR assistant nearly found it and almost called the police. I panicked and drove back across the city at midnight to retrieve it. My hands were raw from gripping the steering wheel, and for a moment I felt the old panic, the want to run and cry and beg her to take me back. I sat in the car and let my face harden. I took the envelope and burned it in the trunk of my car, watching the smoke curl into the night. It was a small humiliation, and it taught me to be calmer, to plan only what I could control. Another time, Elisa's husband nearly discovered our correspondence. He asked Elise a question about a bank charge. She stammered. He looked at her the way a man looks when something small tells him a larger truth. For a moment I saw the possibility of our whole plan collapsing into more rubble. Elise, steadier than I expected, lied smoothly. She had had practice at deception now, whether she liked it or not. The danger passed. Doubt wasn't only external. It crept in from the inside, in the quiet moments when rage cooled and conscience bled through. I thought of the man I had been. I thought of the nights when she had whispered in my ear things I now suspected were rehearsed lines. I thought about our friends and the faces that had turned at the first whisper of scandal. Was my pursuit going to make things worse for people I still cared about? Would I become unrecognizable to myself? I asked myself what justice meant. Was it her ruin? Was it proving to the world she had been dishonest? Was it reclaiming the life I thought I owned? Or was it the smaller victory of taking my dignity back, by writing the narrative she had rewritten about me? Often, the answer changed like the weather. Some nights I wanted blood. Some mornings I wanted to wake up and forgive, to go to the gym and let my muscles do what anger could not. But the shard was still there. The memory of her smile at the signing had calcified into a promise I could not break. If I was going to act, it had to be measured, purposeful, and fenced in by rules I could live with. My rules were simple. Don't destroy children's futures. Don't put others in harm's way. Don't go to jail. And don't let my revenge be indistinguishable from her betrayal. So I moved like ice melts, silently, inevitably. I began to leak truth in small, socially irreversible ways. A carefully worded email to an account manager that exposed discrepancies in expense reports, a neutral note to a club administrator reminding them that membership rules had been violated. Each move was bland on its face but corrosive in effect. I let bureaucracy do the humiliating work, auditors, moderators, administrators who asked questions and wrote things down. I learned to be patient enough to trust institutions would fold under the weight of evidence if nudged correctly. There were nights I sat alone and rehearsed the confrontation I wanted, imagining the words I would say when the balance shifted. I pictured her face when people began to ask instead of sympathize. I imagined the leaning in of conversation when acquaintances exchanged looks. I was not cruel for the sake of cruelty. I wanted truth to be evident in a way that left no cozy rumors to hide behind. During this period I found a new steadiness in silence. I stopped reacting to her social media posts. I removed myself from the spectacle of people choosing sides. They could keep their hashtags and sympathetic emojis. I would not feed them ammunition. Instead, I let the factual stuff accumulate like winter shadows. When the sun finally came, the ice would show every crack. And in that patience, my grief smoothed into something resembling craft. My hands were steadier now. My voice was flat when I needed it to be flat, sharp when necessary. I practiced the art of being unreadable. She continued to smile in public. She continued to post photos of curated joy. She took flight with the life she wanted, sure that she had cleared me from the scene. That arrogance would be its own undoing. The night I finally felt ready to act, I stood in our kitchen and looked at the same sink where we had made pancakes, at the photo frames where we had smiled at weddings and birthdays. For a moment I tasted old affection and wondered how much of it had been mutual. Then I thought of the pen, the grin at the signing, and the message on her phone. I exhaled. This is not about hate, I told the empty room. It's about balance. And with that, I stepped out from the man who had been broken and became someone with a plan, a partner in another's sorrow, and a cold patience that would see her smile vanish not through spectacle, but through the careful unmasking of what she had worked so hard to hide. I always imagined revenge would feel loud, like thunder, like breaking glass, like a scream. But when the moment finally came, it was quiet. Measured. Precise. I had been patient, meticulous, and disciplined. Now it was time to move. Her reputation was her crown jewel. Every dinner, every charity event, every staged photo on social media, it all fed the illusion of a perfect life. I knew if I wanted to hurt her, I didn't need to throw a punch. I just needed to crack the mask she wore so carefully. It started with a single envelope. Plain. Unmarked. Left on the desk of her department head at work. Inside, carefully arranged photographs. Screenshots. Expense records. Not doctored. Not exaggerated. Just the truth. Her affair in black and white. I never saw her face when the envelope was opened, but I didn't need to. The silence that followed told me enough. Meetings cancelled. Social media accounts gone suddenly private. Whispers rippled through her circle. She showed up at the next charity gala alone, dressed sharp, and smiled wide. But the smile didn't reach her eyes. I saw it in the photographs that surfaced online. The same woman who had mocked me with that victorious grin now had a shadow behind it. A tremor. I didn't stop there. One by one, her friends who had turned against me received pieces of the puzzle. Not all of it, just enough for doubt to worm its way in. Enough to make them question which side of the story they had believed. The perfect image cracked. And once cracks appear, no amount of makeup can hide them. Her greed was always her Achilles heel. She wanted everything, the house, the assets, the future I had built for us. When she signed those divorce papers, smiling like she'd already won, she never bothered to read the fine print. But I did. Hidden in the clauses, buried under her lawyer's arrogance, were technicalities she never bothered to question. I made sure of it. The kind of details that meant joint liabilities remained joint, even when she thought she had walked away clean. The kind of details that allowed me, with the right signatures and timing, to let certain debts fall squarely into her lap. It wasn't immediate. That was the beauty of it. It unfolded slowly, like rot spreading through wood. First, a denial letter from the bank. Then a frozen account. Then calls from creditors she didn't expect. I remember the night she called me, voice sharp, brittle. What the hell did you do? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just let silence hang between us until I said, calm and cold, you should have read what you signed. She cursed me, spat venom through the line, but the fury only confirmed what I already knew, she was slipping. The empire she thought she built from my ruins was starting to collapse. And the best part? It wasn't me taking her down. It was her own carelessness. Her own greed. It was almost too perfect, the way it unraveled. Her lover, the man she had chosen over me, turned out to be no savior. When the cracks in her life widened, he didn't rush to catch her. He stepped aside. I'd like to think Elise, his wife, had a hand in that. Our alliance was quiet, but effective. She fed him just enough doubt, just enough guilt, to make his loyalty falter. And when the financial strain hit, when whispers of scandal stained her reputation, he saw the same thing I had seen too late, she wasn't worth the cost. He left her. Not gently, not privately. He cut ties with a bluntness that mirrored her own cruelty. And she, who once smiled at me like a conqueror, was left alone. No man, no friends, no finances. Just the hollow shell of the life she had stolen. That's when I confronted her. It wasn't planned, not the exact moment. I saw her leaving what was once our house, now stripped, repossessed, the garden overgrown. She was thinner, her hair unkempt, her shoulders hunched. The woman who once walked with her chin high now moved like she was trying to fold into herself. She didn't notice me at first. When she did, she froze. For a moment, I almost felt something. Pity, maybe. The echo of love I used to feel. But then I remembered the smile, the one she wore as she signed away our life like it was a joke. I stepped closer, calm. No anger, no shouting. Just quiet. She broke the silence first. Are you happy now? Her voice cracked. You ruined me. I looked at her, really looked. The woman who once held my heart, who once shared my bed, who once promised forever. Now she was just, small. I didn't ruin you, I said, steady. You did that yourself. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. Her lips trembled. No smile this time. No victory. Only fear. I leaned in slightly, enough for her to see the steadiness in my eyes. Remember when you signed those papers? Smiling like you'd won. I told myself then I wouldn't let that be the last word. She swallowed hard, silent. And now, I whispered, we're even. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the ruins she had built for herself. The first time, she smiled while I broke. This time, I watched as her smile disappeared, crumbling under the weight of everything she thought she'd taken from me. And unlike her, I didn't smile at all. Because revenge, in the end, isn't joy. It's balanced. And the balance had finally been restored. After I walked away from her that final day, I didn't look back. Not once. For weeks afterward, people asked me if I felt triumphant, if finally breaking her down gave me joy. The truth? It didn't. Revenge isn't joy. It's not fireworks. It's not a grand parade. It's silent. It's the absence of the weight that once sat on your chest. It's waking up and not feeling her shadow beside you anymore. It's knowing the balance has been restored, that she could no longer use what I gave her as weapons against me. I never saw her again. Not in person. But I heard things, whispers, rumors. She moved out of town eventually, a ghost in circles she once ruled. The glamorous woman who had everything now avoided eye contact in grocery store lines, living off scraps of the life she thought she'd stolen forever. Did I miss her? Sometimes, late at night, I'd remember the girl I met in college. The laughter, the inside jokes, the dreams we built together. That version of her, yes, I missed her. But that girl had died long before the divorce papers. All that was left was the woman who smiled as she cut me open. And that woman deserved every shard of what she got. So no, I didn't feel joy. I felt something colder. Final. Because in the end, the story wasn't about her winning or me losing. It was about me making sure her cruelty died with her smile. She signed those papers smiling, and I made sure she'd never smile at anyone else's suffering again.